Hey guys, welcome back to another Out Jeeping YouTube video. In today's video, it's something special. Today I have the privilege to work on this Wrangler right here, and I'm excited to show you guys all the features that it has. Today we're going to be actually installing some Jeep cables onto this Jeep right here, making all the wiring nice and tidy. There's a lot to go over, so without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so right here, this is a 2015 Jeep Wrangler. It's not a stock Jeep, as you can tell. It has lots of upgrades and a lot of goodies in here that make this Jeep really special. This is a family friend that I'm doing some work on. Has a lot of electrical issues that I've just been tidying up, and I'm just going to finish it off by putting a Jeep cables kit on this Jeep and making sure that everything's nice and tidy. But to start off, this thing is sitting on 37-inch mud tires. It has Dana 60 front and rear axles with 488 gears and lockers in front and rear as well. This thing also has a Atlas split transfer case for going off-road, so it has some ultra-low gearing and 4-low. Then also, to top it off, we got something underneath the hood here that makes this thing special. So that right there is not your factory 3.6 Pentastar. That is actually a 6.4 Hemi in there, and boy, let me tell you, this thing definitely gets up and goes barely with any throttle on it. This thing is pretty cool. However, there is some work that we have to go through here. So this Jeep has had the engine swapped by another shop, and then also the owner of this Jeep rolled it, had a tub swapped, and during that process, there's a couple things that were just missed while trying to plug everything back in, which was a bunch of miscellaneous wiring things. So I got most of that pretty much taken care of. Nothing too interesting on that, just like random things like tail lights not working, heated seats, everything like that. So we're going to top it off with finishing up on some Jeep cables right here. Now these battery terminals definitely need to be replacing. Every other time I try to start this thing, it just clicks out because the battery terminals are arcing. These have the factory battery terminals on here that need to get replaced, and then while we're at it, we're going to replace all the cables along with it. So let's quickly go over all the cables that we're going to be replacing today over on this Jeep. Once again, I went with jeepcables.com. Paul over at Jeep Cables is a big friend of the channel, so working with him was always great. And what the kit you see right here, half of it is made to spec of what is existing JK kit that he offers. There's a couple other cables on there that are a little bit different, since this is obviously a 6.4 Hemi. So I made some measurements beforehand, sent it over to Paul over at Jeep Cables, and he was able to custom make these for me and ship them out. So if you guys are looking for some cables that he maybe doesn't offer on his website, contact him over on his website there, and he'll be able to get back to you and make some custom cables for you as well. But right here, these cables are nice 2-gauge copper stranded cables right here, and I opted to go with some black sheathing on this to give it a nice clean and slick look. But overall, it's basic stuff that you're going to find in every Jeep cable kit. Stuff going from the battery to all your grounds right here. This is where all the black ends are. Then you have your positives right here for your alternator, your PDC, and your starter as well. So other than that, I'm going to start over on the Jeep, start undoing some things, and I'm just going to take it easy, not get too overwhelmed, just replace one cable at a time, and get them all in there and have this thing all nice and tidied up. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is actually just to remove the battery that's in here right now, give me a little bit more room, then we can kind of start pulling out some of the old wires and replace them with the new ones. So we got some terminals on here, and for the most part they're already loose, so we can probably just pop these off. Alright, so with the battery out of the way, we can take a look at each of our terminals and determine all the power cables going to each terminal are. We'll start with our positive terminal right here, and we can see we got a few main ones off the back here. These are the factory ones. This green one right here, you can see it's all split just the way it was tied up, and that's actually going to our alternator, because this green indicates that this is a fusible link, which is going to replace with our fuse block on our new cable set. We also have two of them right here that go into the wiring harness. One makes a right, and that's going right to our PDC. Another one goes left, and that falls inside of the wire loomed harness all the way down to our starter on the driver's side of the engine. Now we got two other smaller wires right here. One of them that's in this loom that goes to this little fusible link right there. This actually goes to the S-Pod module that's equipped on this Jeep. That's an aftermarket option, so we'll make sure to put that guy back. Then we also have this mysterious positive right here. Not entirely sure where that goes to. It's nothing thick gauge on this one, so we're just going to put that back onto our new battery terminal as well. Now, other people have mentioned on the JK when you're putting new cables on here that you might just end up having to cut these old wires and just leaving them inside of the old wiring harness, and I might end up doing that at least for the starter cable and a couple of grounds, just because ripping it out of the other harness is a lot time consuming, and it's just easier maybe if we just cut it there, tape it up, and be done with it. Now over on our ground over here, we're actually missing one of the main grounds, and that is actually one that goes from the terminal to the front fender right here, which is probably why this Jeep has a lot of issues, and I had to add a couple of grounds in a couple of areas just to make some features work. So we're going to add that guy into place. We also have 3 main cables coming off of this as well, that we're going to trace and see exactly where we go with them and see if we can get them out of the harness. Otherwise, we'll just end up cutting them as well. So I'm going to start with the positive because that seems to be a little bit more straightforward. Then we'll jump back onto the ground and get that one taken care of as well. Alright, so I'm starting by replacing the cable that is going to the PDC to the battery positive terminal. That's this guy right here. So looking at the harness right here, I took some of the loom off of there, and I just want to be able to cut this back enough so that way it's not sticking out of the harness and looks like someone easily just cut your wires. I want it to look kind of clean and then just tape it up after. But you can do what you want. You can cut it wherever you want and make it presentable how you will. I'm not going to put this one back into the factory loomed harness just because this has enough protective coating on its own, and then also the harness is a little bit longer and this is going to be a little bit shorter. It's just going to go basically from here to here, and then it's going to be tucked up nicely, zip tied into place. So I'm just going to go or cut as far back as I can, and then same thing on the other end right here. I took the cover off of this body control module or PDC, and right here we have a 13mm nut that's holding on the other end of our cable. I'm going to take that off, cut that as far back as I can to clean it up and make it look all nice. Alright, so I ended up just getting that PDC wire completely out of the harness since it was a short length, and then I'll tape that all up and make it look nice when I'm done. One thing I did find that was pretty funny is I was talking earlier that we're missing the ground that actually goes to the front fender right here, and I think I found it. So this ground that comes off the terminal kind of goes down, loops through the battery box, then comes back up and reconnects right here onto the battery terminal. So effectively, that cable is doing nothing. It should be located up here where our fender stud is. So I'm going to take that guy out of the wiring harness as well, since we're going to obviously replace that with the new one, shorter distance, directly to the fender. Alright, so before I tidy up this harness, I'm just going to end up cutting all these other cables since I'm going to tuck them all inside this harness and they won't be visible anymore. And once again, we got 2 more positive cables going down over here, and to be able to completely remove it from the harness, I have to rip it all out, and it's tucked in there pretty good. So we're going to do the easy way. We're just going to cut this right here. This is our alternator wire, which it actually runs in the harness right here. Goes all on top of the passenger side valve cover, and it's in the harness where all the injector wires are going into, and that's going to be a lot of work trying to do that. So we're just going to snip it there, and then once we get down to the alternator, which is located right down here, we're going to snip that other end and tidy it up as well. And then this other wire right here, this other thicker one, that one actually goes all the way to the driver's side of the engine where our starter is. So we're just going to cut both of those guys right here. And we can pull out the rest of our positive terminal. Then we got this other mysterious positive that was on there with a smaller terminal on there. Now, thinking ahead, I know that this is not going to fit onto the new battery terminals that we have, just because this is like a 1/4-inch hole right here. So I'm actually going to relocate this and have it connect to the positive terminal that's on a PDC box right here. It is still a little small, but I think I can drill this out to like a 5/16 on this terminal, and it's going to fit there just fine. Tied it up so it's not too much going on for the battery terminal as well. And over on the ground, I did also cut off this one that goes down into our harness over here. And this is actually located on the engine block. They grounded this one on the bell housing, which is kind of near the starter. So once again, that's going to be a little bit more difficult to pull that guy out. So I just cut that there. Obviously, the one we just took out was supposed to go to the fender, but just kind of looped back to itself. Then we also have this other ground right here, which kind of looks like it's part of that S-Pod module. So we're going to pull this guy off as well, and that should be the rest for our negative terminals. Alright, so when we move everything to the side, we can see this main harness here that I took out the cables. Looks a lot more simplified now. I'm just going to put the loom back on, tape this up, and make it look good. I do have some new loom right here, so I'll use some of this compared to the miscellaneous pieces that were in here before that kind of split off into separate Ys for those cables going through it, since this is just a straight shot now. Alright, so I got our harness all put back together. It looks nice there. And I also went ahead and changed the terminals on these smaller wires right here. I actually had some bigger terminals right here that are able to fit over the new battery terminals. Two of these you're not going to have unless you have an S-Pod unit like this, which is a relay box on the other side, which controls lights and everything. So I just got those bigger terminals onto that, and then we also have our mysterious positive wire right here. Just put a bigger terminal on that, so that way everything can go to the new terminals right there as well. So now that we got it kind of cleaned up around here, and before I start routing our new wires into place, I'm going to get our battery back into place and then get that bolted down. It didn't have a factory hold down, which is normally just a little plastic piece with a bolt on the passenger side of the battery. So I went and picked one up, and then we can actually bolt down this battery, start laying out our cables and everything, and start bolting things into place. So now we got our little hold down with our bolt. I'm going to feed this down into here. Alright, that's tightened down. This battery's a lot more solid on there. That's probably why the battery terminals just got loose over time, is this thing was just wiggling around, and you definitely want your battery secure when off-roading. Alright, so I'm going to start with our PDC cable right here. I'm going to bolt it up onto the bottom control module side. I do have a power tap coming off of there that I'm going to stick on there as well. So the factory cable that went to this PDC box actually had a little bit of the 90-degree downwards, but just since I have another cable in here, I'm just going to bend the tab ever so slightly so it bends downward, and that way we should have plenty of clearance for our cover. Now to put this fuse box cover back into place, you're going to have a little bit of a tab down here. You're going to want to head and cut that off flush with the rest of the box right here. I already done that, so I'm going to go ahead and stick this back on there. There we go. Got our other end of our positive cable, and that's just going to be long enough to fit where our positive terminal is going to be over here. So that's one cable in place. So while I'm still working up here, I'm going to fill in another shorter piece of wire, and this is the ground that goes to the fender, and that is actually going onto the lug right here. Looks like we got a 10mm nut. The way I'm going to route it is I'm going to tuck it down underneath this purge valve for the evap system. So it's going to tuck in like that, make a little bit of an S, and then connect right there to our ground. Alright, that guy's in right there. Now I'm just going to loosely put it on these terminals over here. Probably won't put the positive on yet because I don't want any power going through any of the systems right now. But just to hold this into place, I'm just going to loosely put it on there. All right, so now moving on to the alternator charging wire. What you're looking at right now is inside the passenger front wheel well. I did take off this wheel well liner that was in here, this aftermarket aluminum one, so that way we can access our cable, which is right here going to the back of the alternator. There's no way to access it from the top. There's definitely no way to access it from the bottom. This engine is very stuffed in between the frame rails here, so this is the best location we can get it. So we have this plastic cover that I took off. This basically just goes over that terminal. I pop that up over here and we have a 13mm nut we're going to remove, and then we can take our old cable off of the alternator. Set that nut to the side. Then can pull off our cable, which is nice and loose here. And I'm going to pull this up through, see if I can, or I might just end up cutting it down here, that we can get our new wire to feed down and bolt it into place. Alright, so I pulled that wire back up through the top here. I also went and undid this little electrical connector that activates your alternator, and basically just cut our wire right here where it goes into that loom, taped it up nicely. No one will ever know that there's a wire in there. And I also went and took our plastic connector off. We're going to transfer this over to our new cable. But for the rest of this, all I got to do is just push this back down into place, snap this into the back of our alternator, and then we can route our new wire down in there as well. Alright, so I fed down our new wire. I'm going to position this the best I can. And then feed our nut on the back side. And with that tightened up, I just got our little cover. I will snap back over this. I'm just going to take a zip tie just to make sure that holds into place. Alright, so I got our alternator cable coming up here, and I zip tied it to the existing harness that goes over the valve cover right here to keep it all nice and neat. And we have it right here. This end of the line says fuse, so this is where we're going to put our fuse block. It's going to get zip tied into our jumble of wires right here, and then we have another wire coming off that to our positive terminal on the battery. But before I do that, I do want to start running some other stuff. I want to run our grounds, and it's going to start getting a little bit more tight in here. The way I had Paul make my ground cables is that I'm going to utilize the firewall ground actually right here, where it looks like we have another thing grounded onto that post right there. I'm going to take that off, and the way that I have the ground set up is that we're going to have a cable coming from the negative terminal all the way down to the underside of the engine block, and then from there it's going to have a jumper wire going from the engine block to the frame, and then also on the engine block we have another wire coming up to the firewall there. That way we know everything is nicely grounded and we shouldn't have any issues. So I'm going to start off, take off this nut right here and feed down our cable right here that goes down to our engine block. We're going to start with the firewall to engine block piece, so I'm going to snake that down the best I can in between the engine and the firewall. We'll meet it on the other side. I'm going to take my long ground cable. This one's also going to go to the engine block, but this one goes to the battery negative. I'm going to fish this down alongside with it. Alright, so looking underneath the Jeep, this is the passenger side of the engine block, and I already went ahead and just kind of hooked some things up for our grounds like talking about earlier, just because there's no filming room when my hands are in the way. So I got our two grounds coming down, as you guys saw from above, and they're going to one of the empty bolts that are on the side of the engine block here, so I got those two on there. Then I also have a shorter ground which goes to another bolt just because it's a little bit crowded on that one bolt with the two, and that guy is going to our frame right there. That's a nice available spot to put the ground on for up there. Everything is nicely zip tied into place off the exhaust, and we should be good to go down here for our grounds. Alright, so now I'm going to route our last long hard cable, and that is our starter cable right here. So this guy, I made it a little bit longer because it's going to follow along our engine harness going all the way along the firewall and then drop down on the driver's side We got a nice heat sheathing right here that's going to go on the starter side, so that way it protects this wire. And I'm basically just going to find the best way to kind of snake this down, and then we'll go down below. I'll take off the old cable, cut that end off, tape it up, and then we'll hook on our new starter lead right here. Then that should lead us with just tidying up all the wires right here and connecting everything to the battery. I'm going to bring this over. I'm going to snake this down over here. Alright, so we got our starter here on the driver's side of the engine. We got another 13mm nut. I'm going to go ahead and loosen that up. Now, let's see if I can snip this guy off. Alright. That one was a little tough to cut. That fiberglass insulation makes it a lot harder, so I'm just going to tape this up quick. Now, cutting off the end like that, it's not necessary, but it's good for to ensure that it doesn't accidentally, the old cable get put back on there. Say if the starter goes bad, someone replaces it and they put the old cable on there, and now they're wondering why their Jeep won't start. So it's always good just for future reference for other people, so that way nothing gets hooked up incorrectly. So now we got our new cable. I'm going to stick that onto the terminal. I'm going to point it up so that way when it's tight it doesn't get anywhere near the exhaust. We'll plug our little wire in. Now I'm going to start zip tying this out of the way, and then we're pretty much done down here. Alright, so we got our positive cable for our starter, ran all here, zip tied to the harness back there. Now I'm just putting on the other end of our alternator cable right here with our fuse block into place. Now I just got to tighten this down. These are 14mm nuts. Then we got our little cover that goes over. Alright, so now we're on the home stretch. We're going to get all of our negative cables hooked up to our terminal over here. So we have our ground going to our fender. Then we also have our ground going to the engine block. I'm going to double them up right here. Then I have one more ground for our S-Pod module. Then I'm going to snake around the back side since I have some extra slack. Then we'll hook this guy on here as well. I might actually put it on the other side of the bolt just so it's not in the bind with the other cables. And we do have one more ground cable that goes for the winch, but I'm going to put that on at another time since I might have to drill at that terminal anyway. And to tighten this up, it's just going to be a 9/16. There we go. I'm not going to connect it yet until we get the positive cables all in, in case something were to touch a terminal. Stick that down to the side. I'm going to start with our starter cable. Then I'll go to the mysterious power wire. And then we have our power right here for our S-Pod. Put on a terminal, and then we have our PDC, and then we have our alternator wire. So I'm going to hook these onto the battery. We're going to get some power into the system. This is why I don't zip tie stuff into place, just so I can make sure everything reaches properly. That's on there. We'll snug that up with the 1/2" bolt right here. And then we got our ground. there we go. Got all our cables in. I'm going to go and kind of clean this up a little bit, make it more presentable. Then we'll go and try and start the Jeep, see if everything works great. Alright guys, that's going to be a wrap for this project on this Jeep JK. It was fun working on this thing, a little bit different than what I'm used to with the older Jeeps, but I hope you guys found this interesting and helpful if you're doing it the same on your Jeep JK Wrangler. You guys can find what I'm using in this video from jeepcables.com. If you want something custom, make sure you contact Jeep Cables and they'll be able to pretty much do anything for you on that as well. They have normal applications for Jeep Cables on a variety of Jeeps as well. So make sure you guys check out jeepcables.com. I want to thank you guys for watching. If you want to help support the channel, please like and subscribe to the Outjeeping YouTube channel. And if you want to help support by buying some merch, we got some t-shirts and stickers you guys can find in a link down below. If you guys have any questions or comments, make sure to post them below. But until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video.